You were live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta in Washington. Good evening. New drama and a new deadline and a new legal ruling in the latest indictment of Donald Trump. The federal judge overseeing Trump's election fraud case has responded to a court filing from special counsel Jack Smith late last night. Smith wants a protective order after Trump posted this last night. It says, quote, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." Smith wants the judge to stop Trump and his legal team from publicly discussing sensitive evidence and is citing that social media post as one reason why. And the judge has now given the Trump team until 5 p.m. Monday to respond. A short time ago, the judge denied their request to push back that deadline. Smith had called it an unnecessary delay. Joining us now to talk about this is Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, a California Democrat who served on the January 6th Select Committee. Congresswoman, thanks very much for joining us. We appreciate it. Your sense of what has been taking place over the last 24 hours. The special counsel is asking the judge to issue this protective order to restrict Trump and his lawyers from publicizing sensitive evidence. And they're noting this social media post that came from Trump yesterday evening, essentially leveling a threat, an unspecified, generic threat. But I suppose some could infer that he was trying to send a warning to people involved in this case.
Well, yes, it certainly is an obvious reading of that. He's coming after people. Now, I understand some of his supporters said it was in a political sense, but any ordinary person reading that would come to the conclusion that he would be coming after people he perceived as opposed to him. I think seeking this protective order is not unusual. There's a protective order already in the documents case in Miami, and it's not uncommon in criminal cases. If the special prosecutor is going to share all the evidence with the defendant, which is what he wants to do promptly, he needs to be sure that that won't be put out there in the public to intimidate witnesses, make people afraid to speak. And we do know that the ex-president has a record of threatening and demeaning other judges, their families, lawyers who are prosecuting. So this is not something that's just out of the air. And I think the special prosecutor has a legitimate concern that people who might speak up or would be afraid that witnesses' testimony would be chilled. It doesn't prevent the president from speaking. It just prevents him from publicizing the evidence that he receives from the special prosecutor.
And is it your sense, Congresswoman, based on your work with the January 6th committee, that the former president is just going to start playing these kinds of games? And that it may dovetail somewhat with his defense team's legal strategy. If the former president could go out there and stir up a hornet's nest like he did with the social media post, and it prompts the special counsel to say to the judge, we need some kind of protective order in this case. You can see where I'm going with this. The former president can continue to do this from now until there's a trial. And that would play right into his playbook, as you know all too well, of delay, delay, delay when he gets into legal hot water.
Well, his game is delay. We know that from the way he dealt with us in the January 6th committee, always delaying matters, trying to prevent them from being heard. But I think it's interesting that the trial judge in this case didn't allow a delay. I mean, the answer has to be filed by day after tomorrow. Trump's lawyers asked for an extension. She denied it. And so a decision will be made quite soon. He's not going to be able to engage in unreasonable delay unless the trial court judge goes along with it. And that's not her reputation. She's no nonsense.
And just a day after this arraignment, in this third criminal indictment, Trump was joking that 4 may be his lucky number. Here's what he said at a rally last night.
Every time they file an indictment, we go way up in the polls. We need one more indictment to close out this election. One more indictment, and this election is closed out. Nobody has even a chance.
It's true that Trump has remained the GOP frontrunner despite these legal problems, and he seems to be relishing all of these indictments coming his way. There may be another one coming in this case in Fulton County, Georgia. What is your reaction to what he is saying?
Well, I don't know what to make of it. I guess he believes that his supporters are further energized when he's charged with a crime. I think that's kind of weird, but perhaps it's true. It has nothing to do with what the wheels of justice have to do. If prosecutors feel that and have evidence to support that he's committed a crime, they have to charge that. They can't weigh the politics of this thing. Now, it's pretty clear. I mean, he doesn't have strong defenses on many of these indictments. It looks like his biggest defense is to try and get elected and pardon himself. So that's another factor, I think, that's going on here.
And how much of your committee's work contributed to this latest indictment? When you read the special counsel's indictment, did you see a lot of the committee's work essentially showing up in this very important document from the special counsel?
Yes, I did actually. Starting at the beginning, it was the tale that we were able to tell through the evidence we uncovered almost completely. There were a few things that we did not uncover. For example, Mike Pence would not talk to us, so we didn't know he'd taken contemporaneous notes. We didn't know that the president said he was too honest when he refused to go along with the president in overturning the election. We didn't know that there was a discussion about calling out the army to American cities if he succeeded in overturning the election. But for the most part, the scheme that the then president was at the center of, the multifaceted effort to overturn the election, was what we uncovered. And I think it probably was of help to the special prosecutor. Obviously, he would have to interview the witnesses himself. He couldn't rely on our interviews, but it looks like he went ahead and did that. And it was a pretty quick process for a federal investigation, really less than a year. And now we have these very serious allegations that have been filed.
And what is your sense of what the former vice president said to the special counsel that appeared in the indictment, that former President Trump essentially told Mike Pence, "Oh, you're too honest"? Does that say to you that you would have loved to have had him speak to the January 6th committee? I guess that's one of my questions. But it also, doesn't it set the table, Congresswoman, for the former vice president to be perhaps the star witness or one of the star witnesses at the former president's trial in this?
Well, possibly. I mean, when I read that, first thing I thought was, number one, Pence refused to lie and to violate his oath. We already knew that. But, the president was asking him to be dishonest. And I think it was really, in essence, to ask Pence to be part of the president's dishonest scheme. It's almost an admission of dishonesty on the part of Trump. Yes, we would have liked to have heard from the vice president, although we did hear from his people and learned a lot. The other witness we don't know about, it doesn't look like Mark Meadows fits the description of any of the co-conspirators that are mentioned in the indictment. Now, I don't know whether something about him is going to come later or whether he's a witness. If he's a witness, he knows a great deal. And we did try to speak to him. I mean, he was with Trump throughout the riot, at every step of the way, as the plot was made. So he has a lot of information.
And if you're the special counsel, Jack Smith, I assume, Congressman, Mark Meadows is somebody you want taking the witness stand. He did cooperate to some extent with the January 6th committee until he stopped. He provided your committee with a lot of those very important texts, which revealed a lot of information. I have to imagine that the special counsel's office has that information as well. But Mark Meadows appears to be one of these individuals who could just be a fountain of information for the special counsel in making this case.
Well, of course, we wanted to talk to him. I've never really understood why he provided all of uh, these documents, text messages, and the like, and then decided not to cooperate. What happened? Whether President Trump, then President Trump, prevailed upon him, I just don't know. Obviously, the information he did provide was very enlightening, and we certainly wanted to follow up with them by interviewing him, but we were unable to do that. If Jack Smith is able to do that, I believe he will find out a lot.